And welcome back to Mental Health Matters with Dr. Scott Terry at KRUU FM, the most powerful radio station on the entire planet. Today we have, once again, an incredible we have an incredible guest with
We have an incredible host also.
Yeah, we have an incredible co-host here. Rob, tell us about yourself for a second and introduce our guest.
I'm Rob Hubler, and I'm a resident of Fairfield for about the last 7 years. I have been in Fairfield off and on since the late 60s, and I am also a Presbyterian minister. I am a father of two, and our guest today is Renee Roscoe Morrison, who is a child therapist.
She is a wonderful therapist with the Art and Counseling Center, the center I run throughout Chicagoland and in Iowa, and a wonderful therapist who is going to talk to us today. Among several issues, we're going to start with parenting, and then we're going to get into music and therapy, and if we got time, a little religious and spiritual stuff. But for the moment, Renee, why don't you introduce yourself and say what you'd like to start with today?
Okay. Hello. Like Rob said, I'm Renee Roscoe Morrison, living in Naperville, Illinois. Grew up in this area my whole life. And although I do treat individuals, couples, families, my eventual focus, I would like to be children because I get them and love to work with them and have worked with them non-therapeutically for years through music and through being a parent. And the kind of beginning topic, anyway, that I wanted to start with was, in my mind, is the heading is Lessons Learned from Children.
Great. Tell us more about that. What lessons have you learned from children, working with children? Again, you're a family therapist. You're a marriage and family therapist. You also went to Wheaton College, among many other places, and you've been with Ardent Counseling Center for several years now. Absolutely a wonderful therapist with us. Fantastic.
Thanks, Scott. Yes, I went to Wheaton College for my master's in clinical psychology, but before that, it's kind of, one of those life journey things. I started out at the Wheaton College Conservatory, got a bachelor's in music performance, vocal, and then I went on to grad school at University of Texas in Austin and got my master's in opera performance. Loved it there. But, things happen and don't happen, and then you get married and have kids, and then you decide if your first love, your first career choice is going to work out, which it didn't seem like it was going to. So I moved on. Part of that process was becoming a parent. It was, for me, the most defining area of growth in my life because the way I saw it was I let my children teach me a lot about myself. I think that it's not always apparent to people, kind of like a pun, but it's not always apparent to parents how much your children can teach you if you let them.
Yeah, that's great. And, we have three different perspectives on parenting, because I am not a parent, but I have practiced marriage and family therapy and worked with kids over 20 years now. And so I get to have the ideal of what a parent should be without having had the experiences, both good and bad, of being a parent. So I think it gives me a different perspective to say this is what should be done. And people get to say, no, practically, that doesn't make sense. And so we kind of come up with a different negotiation of what does it mean to be a parent, and how do you actually learn from people in your life, our families, our children, as you're saying. And Rob has a different perspective of being a father and what it's done for him and what he's learned or not learned.
and I'm interested in when you start off saying lessons learned from children. So tell us some of the lessons that you've learned.
Okay, let's see. And usually they're pretty hard lessons. You learn things about yourself that you either didn't know before or didn't fully know before. Things about where you're lacking, where you don't want to do anything different. You don't want to change. Oh my gosh, this is so hard. I can't believe. Those are the moments when you kind of have to, gird your loins and say, okay, am I going to do this or not? Or later on you say, oh my gosh, I didn't know, or I dropped the ball, or I didn't do that as well as I could have.
Give us an example.
Let's see. So the first thing that happened when I had my first baby was I actually had trouble with postpartum depression, and it really took the form of anxiety, huge anxiety. And, after sitting with it for a while and, trying to understand and figure it out, I realized it was because I felt that here I had brought this being into the world that was the most important thing to me. I wanted the absolute very, very, very best for this child, and I realized that I would not be able to give it to her. So it's sort of like this little, mini tragedy for me, and I just didn't know what to do with that. So it really showed me, first of all, how it kind of tied in with my fears about myself, about not being able to do things, about not being good enough, about perfectionism, and where to just kind of draw the line and say, hey, the whole idea of good enough parenting was phenomenal for me when I heard about that.
Absolutely. It reminds me of a silly commercial I just saw where the woman was in gloves and made sure that the person, their first child, had gloves on and had a gown and, absolutely was spotless. And wouldn't breathe on her child and had a mask on. And then the second child, she's getting her car repaired and she has to answer the phone and throws the kid at the car mechanic who has grease all over him, and she's just gets that sometimes the germs are good and let's go. And I think it's important when we come back to this notion of perfectionism, which we all can relate to at times, of having to be perfect, having to be right, having to be correct, or we're not good enough, we're not okay. And it's so important to be able to let go of that and come back to, how do I be good enough without having to be perfect? Because we learn in life not by being perfect and not making mistakes, but we learn through our mistakes. Life is learned through trial and error. That's the best possible way to learn. And yes, we make mistakes, but what's important is not the mistakes that ever define us. It's the successes. It's how we get up again. And how you got up again was rather amazing, even in your story, how you eventually became a therapist from a wonderful music career, my God, being an opera artist, to being a therapist and being able to take that lesson learned from your child of not having to be perfect so you can really be there for your clients, so you can really make a difference in their lives. I'm saying I haven't been a parent, I haven't been an alcoholic, but that doesn't mean I can't treat people who have drunk. In fact, sometimes I could treat better than somebody who's got something.
I can speak to both of those, by the way, parent and alcoholic. Go on.
No, go ahead, Rob. You speak. Tell us what's your experience.
Well, the lessons, I'm glad that, Renee, when you started saying the lessons you learned, I had anticipated that your kids would teach you these wonderful things about yourself and stuff. Instead, you said it taught you some of the things about yourself that maybe weren't the most admirable, and that's a lot of the lessons that I learned from my kids. Just I had a hard time waking up in my marriage, and I mentioned alcohol. I'm a 32-year recovering alcoholic and drug addict. In fact, next month is my 32nd anniversary. And so when my kids were growing up, I was a flaming, gaping alcoholic and drug person. And even though we counseled a lot, and you mentioned the two of you were talking about perfectionism, I remember in one of the counseling sessions, we were there because my wife was a perfectionist. And speaking of being a perfectionist, let me do what we're supposed to do here. This is KRUU Radio, 100.1 FM on the radio dial. We are in the Cultural District of Fairfield, solar-powered radio, and this is, you're listening to Mental Health Matters with Dr. Scott Terry and Rob Hubler.
And today, with Renee Moscow Morrison, talking about parenting. Great therapist.
And I was talking about one of the waking up points for me is that, like I said, my youngest son was 4 or 5 years old when we got divorced. When he turned 21, he changed his name from my name to his stepfather's name, which was a very traumatic thing for me. But on the other hand, my wife married a really wonderful guy, and he raised him, and he was a wonderful father, and he looked to him to being his father and not me. But that was a lesson. That was a lesson that was a very hard lesson for me, but a lesson that really said something to me and let me know, about what I had been doing or hadn't been doing as a parent.
And you could take that into your life and being able to let go of you having to be right, and it's okay that you fell down. Again, we all fall down.
Yeah, it wasn't that, it's interesting. I wrote this down just now when you were talking. It wasn't that I was trying to be a perfectionist. It was that I knew if I did it my way, that was the perfect way of doing it. so I just did it my way.
Yeah.
No, Frank Sinatra there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm getting nervous about, like, oh my gosh, when do we have to stop here for the break or whatever, but I'm just going to keep going, and then you guys just stop me. It's when you're talking about, the breakdowns and the brokenness that happened in your family because of your alcoholism and drug use, and, really those are just symptoms and, places you went to deal with whatever pain that you were trying to run away from, and even if you're not indulging in, substances like that, that can still happen when you're a parent. We all have pain that comes with us, and one of the other lessons that I learned was that you can get broadsided by some real deep inner pain when you are at different points in your children's lives where, let's see, how do I say this? That where they are at a certain age that you were when you experienced something painful or sad. And what happened for me, again, this is another lesson I'm moving on to, I guess, is I found that I was getting this feeling of this sadness that was coming at me. My daughter was about 4 years old. I was like, what is happening? What is happening? Oh, my gosh. Things seem to be going fine. My analytical part, at least, was kicking in, and nothing's been going wrong, blah, 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 And then it became really clear to me as one of those kind of meditative things, even when you're just, walking around, what's happening, tell me. And it became clear when my husband was playing with her and being really sweet and fun and all that, and she was having a great time. And in a moment of clarity, I was so happy for her. I was so happy at what they were doing. I was watching her smile on my face and letting them do their thing, because I knew it was so important for them to be together. And then I felt this really, real deep sadness and pain because I realized that I had not received that from my dad even that young. I knew, a lot of things in my conscious mind from the fractured relationship that we enjoyed, went through whatever for years. But, it was really young. And so I was re-experiencing that pain. And I think that happens for people, and they don't realize it. And if they don't realize it, things can happen. They can do things. They can want to go away or this kind of thing,
Yeah, I think that's fascinating because it's that same notion of you're having children and it's triggering you not just as a parent and what you're learning and taking into your life, but it's also triggering your past that's unresolved and that you need to clean up. And memories and experiences that you suppressed and didn't want to maybe address or something. And now you don't have a choice. It's in your face and it's like, okay. And instead of running from it, it sounds like you embraced it and said, it's okay to change. I'm safe now. I can do this. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I would say that it kind of was this whole package tied up for me, because I was so happy and then I was so sad, and then I said to myself, well, now here's where the healing is. I'm providing by my choice of mate, there was a lot of conscious choice involved. I was a little bit older when we got married. By my choice in mate, I'm working to change this for my daughter, and something else that's good about it is that because I didn't have it, I know how important it is, and so I'm going to nurture that for my daughter. I'm not going to step in or try to take attention away or anything like that. So that was good. And at the time, my dad was still alive, and so I continued. I mean, I always had kept up a relationship with him, but I continued to reach out to him. I talked to my husband about what was happening for me and what I was feeling, and he was really empathic with me. And I think at some point he even emailed my dad or something just about how important my dad was to me and all that kind of stuff. So it was very cool. It was a point. I guess it's one of those, you choose which way you're going to go with it, towards the light or towards the darkness, just in terms of, are you going to bring something to light and do something positive with it, or are you going to push it down and have it fester or molder away? And so went towards the light is all good.
That's great. And you also then pulled in these other experiences in your life, music and this notion to be a therapist and to make a difference. What other lessons have you learned? How do you think you pulled this all together?
How did I pull? Oh, well, I'm still pulling it.
That's a great thing.
Go ahead. I think Rob was going to say something.
No, I just said it's a great thing that you're still pulling it together.
Oh, you're never done because you're always learning. The more stuff you learn, you're like, oh my gosh, I have to take care of that now, or, whatever.
Yeah, it is. And so when you come to that point for yourself, what do you think is the next stage? What do you feel like is your next stage to pull it together, to create something more powerful, more meaningful, the next lesson? What do you it's like you can almost anticipate this next lesson that you're going to learn.
Well, and this would be, if it's just about me, then we're kind of going away from, whatever it is with children. As far as the children go, each stage of their life teaches you more things, shows you really, wonderful things. But you, as a person who's also a parent, are growing alongside them, hopefully, and I feel like that's what's happened for me. So, yeah, as they've gotten older, and I'm growing and learning and changing and feeling more, not even more powerful. It's feeling more able to accept the power that's inside me. That we all have. I'm not just saying it's just me. I'm not like a superhero, but like everybody has. So being willing to go with it more. So I'm like reaching out in all different kinds of things right now. Because there's a lot of things that I love to do, and music is still one of them. You're a musician. That doesn't go away. That's part of you. So, I have a CD for that I've made for little babies. It's a lullaby CD, and so I'm kind of at another phase of trying to market it, trying to do something different with it. I also love chocolate. Sorry, Scott, I know that's not this is not on your approved list of things to eat, but love chocolate, and so I'm developing some ice cream sauces, hot fudge, that kind of thing. So I'm just kind of I'm always doing things, but a lot of it is accepting the power and the inspiration and the gifts that God has given me, and really trying to make sure that I keep encouraging myself / kicking myself in the pants to get it out there to people and to share with people, because I do think that is, for me, that is the very most important realization about why I feel I'm on this planet, and it's about reaching out to other people. I think that's the most important thing we can all do with each other. And so therapy comes into that, as well as, daily life, things I do.
That's fantastic. And you are listening to Mental Health Matters with Dr. Scott Terry and Renee Roscoe Morrison, a fantastic therapist with the Art and Counseling Center. And Renee, I'm going to ask you in a second about tips for parents and tips for kids that you'd recommend of how you can pull what you've learned, both as a therapist, as an artist, which is still prevalent. Even in therapy, you come at it with a creative perspective. Even in your other ventures, chocolate, that you're coming at that almost from a therapeutic perspective. It's like you're putting it all together as a package. So anyways, I'd like some tips. You're listening to Mental Health Matters. We broadcast on 6:30 at Tuesday nights and 12:30 Thursday afternoons. You could email us at mentalhealthmatters@kruufm.com. And I am so excited to continue with Renee for a few more minutes. So Renee, what would you suggest in terms of some ideas that for parents, some ideas for kids, some ideas for them to put together this essence of this package of what they learned from their kids or can learn from their kids and apply to their life?
As far as one of the things that I wonder if people might be thinking when they're listening to this is, well, how do you know? How do you know when you're at a learning point with your kids? Does that make sense, Scott?
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I feel like is important for all of us, whether it's parenting or anything else, is to be aware as possible of our physical cues. Physical that then, they become this, this physiological response that, believe it or not, that happens first and then it goes to your brain. Because if you're going to learn something really key, it's going to be a deep-seated response, deep-seated emotional response usually. And so you're going to have some clues in your body usually. And if not that, then I'll tell you the other, more like mental things. But you can have that feeling of, I call it, when you're just getting triggered about something. It can be, you can feel a tightness in your chest or a little bit of a pressure, or it might kind of go up into your neck area where maybe you have to catch your breath a little bit. Of course, whenever we're angry, that it's similar to that kind of feeling, or particularly if you are aware. It's hard to be aware in the moment, but if you're aware of, man, I am so mad. I'm like so much more mad than this situation really, deserves, all of that can be telling you, okay, something's going on here. What's going on here? It's not just my child. Is this, something that is bothering me from when I was little? Is it when I was little as a child because I didn't like this, I didn't get this, I didn't understand this? Or are you remembering or feeling, the altercations between you and your parent that weren't going so well and that kind of thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's really, again, about learning to listen to yourself and to trust yourself maybe again, because after the points of having to be perfect or having to be right or having to do something in a certain way and learn from your experiences that maybe there's another way to do something. There's another way to grow and develop this, that I can now take that into my life and create a new meaning, a new way of doing things. And what's important is to recognize what we're experiencing. Secondly, to get what we've made it mean in the past. Third, to maybe create a new meaning, and that this is an opportunity, like what both you and Rob were talking about in terms of things that have happened to you guys, and you've learned and grown from so much. But then the fourth point is the most important. What are you going to do to act on it? What are you going to create now as your next step? How can I take this package from this past, or what I'm going through now, being aware of this, and now what can I create from it so I can be a better parent or learn it so I can grow my life in whatever way?
Right, exactly. And so, when you're saying how do you do that? So, I mean, and this is just what happened for me. I would, and I mean, I'm who I am, and not everybody's going to be like this, but just try, just go with it. I would sit and say, okay, particularly altercations between me and my youngest, they just went south really fast. And I was like, what's going on? What's going on? So I would sit with it, and I would say, okay, well, this happened and this happened, and as a parent, you have an idea of kind of what it is that you're trying to really teach your children when you're disciplining them or when you're with them, or if you are in fact just even trying to teach them something. You have an idea of where you're trying to go with it. And when the child is not receptive to that, whether it's just you're trying to help them with a jigsaw puzzle and they don't want your help, or you're in a knockdown, drag out, tantrum situation or that kind of thing. So, it's okay to sit back and say, okay, I think the first part really is important. Just be like, I don't know what's going on. You can just say that. You don't have to have all the answers. I don't know what's going on. And then you free yourself up, and you just kind of sit with that, and you free yourself up to say, okay, where can I go? What can I do to get some answers? And sure, there's a lot of books out there. In one situation, what was invaluable for me was my daughter and I were with a friend of mine that I'd had since kindergarten. So she knew me really well. She knew my family really well. And so I asked her, I said, what are you seeing, in this situation? And she was really able to help me too. So, lots of different resources, but you yourself are a resource as well when you can really sit with things and kind of combine that
absolutely
idea.
Absolutely. Thank you, Renee. We're out of time, but I love the idea of getting that you're a resource, getting that you don't have to be reactive, getting to take a moment and breathe, that everything isn't life-threatening. I could breathe and not just react. Thank you, Renee, and thank you for listening to Mental Health Matters today. We'll be back next week. Have a great night. Bye.